Mara stood in front of the abandoned house as the evening light slowly faded behind tall silent trees. The house looked weak and forgotten, with broken windows, loose boards, and walls stained by time. Most people would have turned back without thinking, but Mara felt calm instead of afraid. She had bought the house for $100 after years of saving small amounts quietly. Her life before this moment had been filled with loss and long lonely nights. This house felt like a pause from everything she had run away from. She did not see danger in it, she saw space to breathe. The wind moved softly through the yard as if welcoming her arrival. The town around the house was small and distant from busy roads. People watched her from far away but never came close. They spoke in low voices when she passed by and avoided her eyes. Some said the house never kept an owner for long. Others said the place carried memories that refused to sleep. Mara listened but never asked questions. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than curiosity. Still, the words stayed with her as she unlocked the front door. Inside the house the air felt thick and unmoving. Dust floated slowly through thin lines of light coming from cracked windows. Each step she took made the floor complain with tired sounds. The rooms were empty, but they did not feel empty. It felt like something had been left behind, not objects but moments. Mara moved slowly, touching walls and door frames. She imagined people once standing there laughing, waiting, hoping. The house felt aware of her presence in a quiet, patient way. That night she slept on the floor wrapped in a thin blanket. The silence around her felt deeper than the silence she knew before. No voices, no outside noise, only the sound of the house breathing. She woke many times without knowing why. Every time she opened her eyes she felt the same pull toward the living room. It was not fear that kept her awake, but expectation. By morning she accepted that something inside the house wanted her attention. She decided not to fight the feeling. As the sun rose she began cleaning room by room. She swept dust-wiped surfaces and opened windows. Her movements were slow and careful, as if she were a guest, not an owner. While working in the living room she noticed something strange beneath her feet. One part of the floor sounded hollow when she stepped on it. The boards there looked darker and slightly uneven. She stopped breathing for a moment and listened. The sound stayed with her long after she moved away. Mara returned to that spot again and again. She knelt down and brushed away years of dust with her hands. Cold air touched her fingers from between the boards. Her heart began to beat faster, though she could not explain why. She pressed her ear close to the floor and stayed still. There was no sound, yet the silence felt heavy. She told herself it was just an old repair done badly. But deep inside she knew the house was hiding something. She stood up and stepped back, feeling both fear and purpose. Buying the house had not been a random choice. Every step of her life had led her to this place. Whatever was under that floor was not just forgotten wood. It was part of a story that never reached its ending. Mara felt it clearly now. This house was not empty and never truly had been. And her life had already begun to change. Mara did not touch the floor again that morning, but her thoughts stayed trapped there. She moved through the kitchen and hallway, yet her body felt pulled backward. Every sound from the house felt louder than before. The wood creaked as if reacting to her presence. She told herself she needed tools and time. But the truth was she needed courage. The house no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a keeper of something unfinished. Later that day she walked into town to buy supplies. People noticed her more now, and some faces tightened when she passed. An old woman near the store watched her closely. When Mara paid and turned to leave, the woman spoke her name. Mara froze because she had not shared it with anyone. The woman said the house had memories that do not like being disturbed. Mara asked what memories, but the woman only shook her head. The warning stayed with her all the way back. That evening Mara returned to the living room with a small crowbar. Her hands trembled, but her mind felt steady. She placed the tool carefully between two dark boards. The wood resisted at first, then gave a slow, tired sound. Cold air rushed upward, touching her face. She stepped back as if the house had taken a breath. When the board lifted, she saw darkness deeper than expected. The space below did not look natural. She waited a long time before looking closer. When she leaned forward, she saw a narrow opening leading under the floor. The air carried a smell of earth and old fabric. She lowered a light and saw shapes, not dirt, not stone. Her heart felt heavy as her eyes adjusted. There were signs of careful placement, not collapse. Something had been hidden, not lost. The house felt silent, as if watching her reaction. Mara sat on the floor holding the light. Her thoughts moved to the people who once lived here. She imagined fear and rushed choices. The idea that someone had hidden part of their life beneath the floor made her chest tight. This was not trash or broken wood. This was memory placed in darkness. She realized then why owners never stayed. Some truths do not stay buried forever. She covered the opening again as night approached. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound made her tense. She dreamed of footsteps moving beneath her. Not threatening but searching. When she woke before sunrise, her decision was clear. She could not leave without knowing the truth. The house had chosen her because she would listen. And now there was no turning back. The morning light felt colder than before. Mara prepared herself quietly. She understood that what she would find might change her forever. But running away would leave her empty. She lifted the board again without hesitation. This time she was ready to look deeper. Whatever waited below was part of her path now. And the house was finally ready to speak. Mara lowered herself slowly into the narrow space beneath the floor. The light in her hand shook as her feet touched cold earth. The space was smaller than she expected, but it stretched farther than she could see. Wooden beams crossed above her like ribs holding a secret inside. The air felt old and careful, as if it had been waiting. She moved forward one step at a time, listening to her breath. Every sound echoed softly, making her feel less alone and more watched. Her heart stayed steady even as her thoughts raced. As she walked deeper, she noticed cloth-wrapped shapes placed along the wall. They were not scattered or broken. They were lined up with care and patience. Mara knelt beside the nearest one and touched the fabric. It was worn but clean, folded as if someone had wanted to protect what lay inside. She pulled the cloth back slowly. Inside were small objects, letters, and faded pictures. They felt personal, like pieces of a life paused in the middle. She opened one folded paper with shaking hands. The writing was careful and gentle. The words spoke of waiting and hope and fear. They spoke of someone hiding, not from danger but from being forgotten. Mara felt a tight pull in her chest. This was not a place of loss alone. It was a place of memory kept alive. She understood now that this space was built with purpose. As she moved farther, she found a small wooden box. It was heavier than it looked. Inside were more letters tied together. They spoke of a child and a promise to return. They spoke of a woman who stayed when she should have left. Mara sat quietly, letting the meaning settle. The house was not cursed. It was loyal, holding on when people outside had moved on. The truth made her eyes burn with feeling. She leaned back against the earth wall and closed her eyes. Images filled her mind of quiet nights and whispered plans. Of someone choosing hiding over leaving forever. Mara felt connected to this unknown woman. Both had chosen silence to survive. Both had trusted walls more than people. The house had been a shelter, not a trap. And it had waited for someone who would understand. Footsteps sounded above her, suddenly slow and careful. Mara froze, listening. The steps stopped directly over the opening. A voice called her name softly. It was the old woman from the town. Mara felt no fear, only surprise. She answered, and moments later the woman knelt beside the opening. Her face held relief, not shock. The woman told her the truth without hesitation. The house once protected a mother and child who could not be seen. They hid not from harm but from being taken away. The floor was lifted and sealed again by loving hands. The town knew but chose silence. Over time the memory faded, but the house remembered. Mara listened, feeling the weight of trust placed on her. She was now part of that choice. Together they lifted the remaining boards. The space no longer felt hidden. Light filled the narrow room. The old woman smiled gently. She said, "Some stories wait for the right listener." Mara understood her arrival had not been chance. She was meant to uncover, not expose. To protect the truth, not disturb it. The house had chosen well. Mara climbed back into the living room, feeling changed. The house felt warmer, as if it could rest now. She promised quietly to keep the memory alive. Not by sharing it loudly, but by staying. By caring for the walls and the floor. By honoring what had been protected. Her life before felt distant and small. A new purpose had taken its place. Mara spent the next days moving through the house with a new sense of care. Every wall, every step, every sound felt meaningful now. She no longer saw the house as abandoned. It was a place that had protected life when no one else would. She cleaned slowly, fixing small things without changing the soul of the place. The floor above the hidden space was sealed again with respect. She wanted the house to feel safe the way it once had. Staying there no longer felt lonely, it felt right. The people in town began to notice changes in her. She walked differently now, calmer, stronger, more certain. Some greeted her with quiet smiles. Others looked relieved, as if something heavy had finally lifted. The old woman visited, often bringing food and stories. She spoke about the past without fear now. The house was no longer a secret that caused silence. It became a shared memory that brought understanding. Mara began restoring the house carefully. She kept the layout the same and repaired only what was broken. Sunlight filled rooms that once felt closed. The air moved freely, as if the house could finally breathe. At night the silence felt peaceful instead of heavy. She slept deeply without waking in fear. Dreams came, but they were gentle. The house no longer asked for attention, it gave comfort. One afternoon Mara found herself standing in the living room thinking about her own past. She had spent years hiding parts of herself from the world. Not out of fear, but exhaustion. She had believed staying quiet was the only way to survive. Now she understood silence could be strength when chosen with purpose. The woman who hid beneath the floor had taught her that protection was not weakness. It was love in its quiet form. Mara decided to stay in the town permanently. She took small work helping people clean, repair, and organize their homes. She listened more than she spoke. People trusted her easily without knowing why. Homes opened to her the way the abandoned house once had. She respected every space she entered. She knew every wall held stories. Some spoken, some kept safely inside. The house slowly became a place of gathering. Not loud, not crowded, but warm. People came to sit, drink tea, and share simple moments. They felt calm there without understanding the reason. Mara watched from a distance, feeling proud. The house had shifted from hiding to holding. It no longer carried weight alone. Its memory lived in the way it welcomed others. That was enough. The old woman grew weaker with time. Mara stayed by her side, listening to stories late into the evening. Stories of the woman and child who once lived beneath the floor. Stories of choices made with love instead of fear. When the old woman rested for the last time, Mara felt sadness but also gratitude. The memory was no longer fragile. It was safe with her now. Standing alone in the house one night, Mara felt complete. Her life before felt like a path leading here. She no longer needed to run or hide. She had become a keeper of quiet truths. The house had changed her not by revealing something dark, but by showing her the power of care. She placed her hand on the floor and smiled. Some stories do not end, they settle into peace. The house felt different on the morning Mara decided to open every window. Fresh air moved through the rooms, carrying quiet sounds from outside. Birds rested on the fence and sunlight touched the wooden floor gently. The house no longer felt like it was holding its breath. It felt awake and settled at the same time. Mara stood in the center of the living room and listened. Nothing called to her from beneath the floor now. The silence felt complete, not empty. Days passed slowly and peacefully. Mara continued her work around town, helping others care for their homes. People spoke openly around her, sharing stories they had kept hidden for years. She listened without judgment, understanding the weight of unspoken lives. The abandoned house became known as a place of calm. No signs, no words explained it. People simply felt better inside its walls. The house no longer needed protection. It had become protection. One afternoon, a young woman visited with a small child. They stayed quiet, sitting near the window. Mara brought them tea and gave them space. The child laughed softly, and the sound filled the room with warmth. Mara felt something shift inside her chest. The memory beneath the floor had not been about fear. It had always been about shelter. About choosing safety and patience. The house was still doing that work. That night Mara walked through each room, touching the walls. She remembered the first time she entered, feeling uncertain and alone. Now she felt rooted and strong. Her past no longer felt like something to escape. It felt like a road that brought her here. She understood that healing did not arrive loudly. It arrived quietly through care and time. The house had taught her that lesson fully. The town changed in small ways over time. People stopped whispering and started sharing. Old misunderstandings faded as conversations grew honest. The house stood quietly, watching from the hill. No longer a place people feared. It became a place they trusted. Mara never claimed credit. She knew she was only a listener and a keeper. The true strength came from the stories themselves. Years later the house still stood strong. Its floors were firm, its walls steady. The space beneath the floor remained untouched and respected. Not hidden out of fear, but honored in silence. Mara had sealed it with care and intention. She taught others that not all truths need to be displayed. Some truths only need to be carried. The house agreed in its quiet way. On a calm evening Mara sat on the porch watching the sky change color. She felt no longing for anywhere else. Her life had found its place. She had learned that meaning does not come from discovery alone. It comes from what one chooses to protect. The house had changed everything, not by revealing pain, but by teaching her how to hold it gently. That knowledge stayed with her always. As night settled, the house rested peacefully. No creaks, no hidden tension, no unanswered calls. Just a home filled with lived moments. Mara closed the door and turned off the light. She knew the story was complete. Not because it ended, but because it found balance. Some stories change lives quietly. And this one had changed everything.